A while ago, I was looking at farming type games and I was planning to play something like Stardew Valley, but then I found in my library I had bought a game called Moonstone Island, which I decided to play instead. It's a very similar type of game with farming, mining, fishing, and characters to build friendships with, but there's also a bunch of floating islands to travel to where you can encounter 100 different elemental critters called spirits. You can catch for yourself and battle with using a deck of cards similar to Slay the Spire. And this game was an absolute blast to play, and I had a ton of elements I enjoy all in the same game. So I wanted to talk about my experience playing the first year. Sheep is a fire spirit with cards that hit multiple enemies, and a card that does damage and removes armor. Reducing a spirit's armor to 0 causes attacks to do more damage and prevents them from attacking for a couple turns, so Sheep seems like it might be the strongest spirit to start with. Its ability passes Burn onto enemies when hit by a fire attack. Burn does damage to every turn, but since you only find fire spirits on fire islands, its ability is sort of useless from the start. Ankylo is an earth spirit that has a slightly stronger attack than the other spirits, a card which does damage and draws a card, and a rage card, which causes it to deal and receive double damage. Its ability causes it to gain 1 rage every 3rd turn in battle, which lets it deal huge damage if the battle goes on for a few turns. And there's Capacity, which is an electric spirit which seems to have the weakest damage output from the start. It has Spark cards which do 2 damage twice. Cards that have multiple hits can be useful in some situations. It also has a charge card which charges itself or an ally to do double its damage output for 2 turns. Every spirit has an ability, usually related to combat, farming, or exploration. This bee revives with 10 HP if it faints in battle. Between its revive and the ability to charge its allies, it seems like a great support spirit, or a good choice if you're looking for a spirit to make battles more manageable. While all 3 spirits will be available to you later, you might want to know how easy each of them is to find in the wild. Capacity and Sheep appear on Electric and Fire Islands respectively, and I saw both of them pretty easily in the wild. There's environmental damage, where Electric Islands shock you periodically, and Fire Islands. Besides, the farther the island is from the main island, the stronger the spirits are. I think the Fire Islands are the first or second most hazardous islands to visit, so starting with a fire spirit would make it easier to get more of them later. Electric islands aren't quite as dangerous as fire, but fighting Capacity can be a bother since they can also revive. Finally, while you'll find earth spirits the easiest around the main island, I never saw Ankylo in the wild. Since you can hatch spirits from eggs, that might be the only way to Ankylo, and starting it would save some trouble. Anyway, I never got the chance to look at Ankylo because I chose Capacity by accident and decided to take it anyway. Oh, and I wouldn't recommend skipping the tutorial. You can get a level from the tutorial fight, but if you skip it, it seems to start you with Capacity automatically. After leaving home, I crash on the island and wake up the next day in the inn. I set my tent up north of the town next to a big pond, for the start of the spring I went around and started harvesting seeds from the local plants. Flax flowers are used to tame spirits, stone fruits restore your stamina, lily pads restore your spirit's HP, and cattails boost their speed. Then I started digging this ever-increasing size grid of soil to plant crops in, and by the end of summer it was the size of like 11 by 15, and I watered it every damn day. Took from about 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. in game. That's a terrible waste of time to water that many crops, but from planting and harvesting seeds from them regularly, I ended up with a critical mass of crops which lasted me until fall or even winter. I also planted tons of lily pads along the edge of the water so I had something to heal my spirits. Other things I did in spring included talking to all the villagers. There's Zed, who runs the Spirit Research Center, Paolo, who has a carpentry business, Ophelia and Guyana, who run the Seed Conservatory, Rowan, who runs the general store, Osano and Quill, who run the inn and tavern, Tobin, who sells fishing gear, and Cleo, who doesn't seem to have a store to run. And most importantly, there's Farah, who works with metal and upgrades tools. I also explored the 3 mines I found by breaking rocks. Since there's 1 mine on every island and Moonstone is made up of 3 islands, there should be 3 mines. I picked up the loot from the chests, mined some ore, and got 2 earth spirits to join me. Punchy Pot has an ability that draws an attack card every turn, one which does damage and draws another card. It's useful for guaranteeing you have damage every turn, and drawing cards to discard for other effects. The real star was Cool Slime, which has 1-cost cards that do huge damage to a single enemy. Its only drawback is having very low HP at the start, but it has an ability that lets you feed it without using up energy. Once you level up a spirit, you can put 1 point into armor, vitality, power, or speed, and I just gave a bunch of vitality to Cool Slime, and now it has super strong attacks and can't be killed as easily. Capacity was the least useful of the 3, but it could charge the others to do more damage, and its revive ability let me survive a few battles when my other spirits were defeated. I also picked up these gates, which if you interact with them, give you a choice of talisman, one to upgrade, add, or remove a card from your spirit's deck when fed the talisman. I started to travel out to the surrounding islands, even with a very slow balloon that I had to make. There's an island just to the left where I first ran into the Magic Man, the last character you can encounter regularly. He travels in a walking house and may show up on the island you're exploring, and he can sell you cards for the spirits you're carrying with and a random talisman every day. I found a few more islands, like a small one southwest of Moonstone, which only had a spirit gate, a big water island west of that one with lots of water spirits, and an island to the north which had a huge maze that I couldn't figure out how to navigate. Finally, some islands have these warp totems which can send you to other islands. That's how I discovered my first electric island. On Spring 21st, there's a festival for the spirit of the spring, which you can give a gift to. Since it said it liked things related to moonstones, I gave it a moonstone, which you can find by exploring islands. They're rare and useful for crafting a lot of things, and the spirit liked it a lot and rewarded me with a ton of talismans. You can also choose a villager to view the event with you to gain a bunch of relationship points, and I had to choose Farah for that. A season is 4 weeks or 28 days, so on the last day I wasted some lily pads by trying to plant them and finding that they died the next day when summer started, but it wasn't a huge loss. As summer started, I ran around the island collecting all the new crops: beach peaches for stamina, pinwheel flowers for a better tame crop, moss balls for HP, and popsy plants for speed. About now is when I noticed the dungeon set right in town next to the hot spring. I found it had a little maze to solve, a few chests, and some spirits, which I was much stronger than, and a guardian to fight at the end. With spirits around level 10, I had no trouble with the fight, and I activated an Ando tree, which boosted my stamina, and found a piece of Magic Man's memory. There's 30 dungeons throughout the world, but I only ended up clearing 3 of them by the end of the year, despite fighting a ton of spirits. I found more islands a bit further from the mainland, like a poison island with poisonous clouds that damage you. I definitely think that poison islands are the least hazardous of the 4 that can hurt to explore on. The spirits were of a similar level, but I found that earth spirits are weak to poison, so I had to avoid battles or risk being destroyed. But there were more crops to harvest there, and some of them had spirit gates too, which refresh each season. It was also sometime in summer that I tried Osano's dish of the day, a mysterious dish you can purchase and eat for a random effect. While I had normally been getting a little bit of stamina from it this time, the dish knocked me flat on my ass and I passed out, ending the day from stamina loss. How fortunate for me. I should have been pretty excited to discover the Spring Temple, one of 4 temples which has spirits to battle, a boss, and another tool to find for clearing it. But I wasn't sure if I'd be able to take on the spirits, so I never went inside the temple for the entire rest of the year. The good news is, I've crafted a Moonstone enchanter, important for several major upgrades. This is how I built a spirit barn to keep my spirits in. I quickly dropped Capacity and Punchy Pot and tried a few other spirits alongside Cool Slime, since I was taming as many as possible to store in the Science Center. I tried Sand Crashel, which can yield coins if you break rocks on water islands, and Fishbow, which has an ability to heal itself when a spirit is fed. This ability works for both yours and wild spirits, so the first time I tried to catch one, I took like 20 minutes trying to whittle its HP down, then feeding it flowers and realizing it would heal to almost full by trying to tame it. I'm just glad I caught it on the first try. But neither spirit seemed very good, so I picked up Chimney, an earth spirit which gives you a chance of immediately breaking a rock when you smash it. This would be helpful for discovering more mines and mining ore. At some point, I ran into my first psychic storm, a kind of weather that happens on one random island every night. It spawns plants you can only harvest during storms, as well as the only way to get psychic spirits. I picked up Misty Slime, which has the same kind of power to do big damage as Cool Slime, but has some really good psychic cards which can give you extra energy or do damage for free. I took it over Cool Slime and made the third spirit Fluff Fox, an earth spirit which has an ability to improve your chance of gaining friendship with villagers. I stayed right until 2 a.m. and passed out on the island. If that happens, you just wake up a few hours later than usual, and you don't lose anything. Then as I traveled to another island, I found a second psychic storm, and ended up passing out again while harvesting more seeds. Spending 2 days without watering my crops meant they died, but I'd say it was worth it. I made a calendar and found it showed me the birthdays of the villagers. This was literally 1 day before Tobin's birthday, so I gave him a great big moonstone quality fish of some sort that I had just caught. I don't know if the quality of the fish matters to the villagers when you gift a fish to them, since it's the only item that you can find in different qualities. For most of the villagers, I gave them a birthday cake, which is easy to make and gives them some friendship, without knowing what they'd like exactly. On summer 21st, there's another festival for watching migrating spirits, which I spent with Farah. It also gives you a chance to get a lot of moonstones, which are still a pretty rare resource at this point. I should lastly mention I loaded up the entire pond with water crops so I could harvest as many as possible, especially since they grow the fastest of any season. I haven't even sold most of them, just kept them around in my increasing collection of chests. You can get money by talking to Zed and turning in research for defeating and taming spirits. That and selling resources to villagers, all of which will buy their preferred resources for 50% more of the sell price. In fall, I crafted most of the remaining machines you get for other kinds of recipes. There's a prep station for making sugar, flour, dough, and noodles, which you can buy from Osano or dump whatever crops you have into making the ingredients yourself. There's a meal station for cooking things and a recipe book. There's a decoration station which has a ton of furniture of different themes. I've never been much for decorating, so I didn't bother with it, especially since you have to find all the recipes from chests. But I found Paolo sells you a random decoration and recipe, so you can get those if you want to save the resources to make them. There's an anvil that you use to make charms that protect you from the hazardous islands. A juice station which has like 4 recipes for improving your odds with talking to villagers. I didn't bother with it since I didn't have the crops anyway. I had furnaces to smelt the ore into ingots, which I got the recipe from Ferris in spring, but by now I had an upgraded furnace which, besides smelting ore faster, could fit more ore at a time. I cleared out a few more mines, which gave me a ton of ore for ingots, and the last machine I made was a recycler that lets me break down most items into their component parts. I made some spirit stalls so I could keep spirits in the barn instead of the research center. Spirits in the barn can sometimes drop resources, which you need for some recipes, but you have to feed them or they'll eventually run away. If you walk behind the stalls, you can hold fiber and put it into their stalls, making it easier to feed a bunch of them at the same time. The fall crops included squishes and applums, which were both the new best for stamina and spirit HP respectively. I finally made a broom, which moves much faster than a balloon. The more islands you travel to, the more chances you have of finding moonstones, and it's 1 moonstone per island. I think they come back at the end of the year. The broom is definitely worth it to make it as soon as you can. Most of the people I saw making videos about their experiences with the game made a broom in spring. Islands I found with the broom included the Summer Temple, but I still didn't bother going inside. The northernmost edge of the map had a fire island where I found out how dangerous they were, especially with how strong the spirits were. But I managed to tame a flamane, which can turn fire hazard damage into stamina gain. With how much ore and moonstones I found, I made some charms to protect myself from poison, fire, and electricity. Osano made a request to make a bunch of the villagers' favorite meals, and Farah's was the first I figured out, since it obviously required squishes. I cooked all of them I had harvested into squish stews, since 3 of them gives a total of 180 stamina, but 1 stew gives 200. Another ongoing quest I've had since spring is finding spirits for all of the villagers, and I have about half of them. Paolo asks for an oaken, a little wooden guy that was easiest to find. Tobin wants a snorkel, which makes fish bite faster when fishing. Magic Man wants a fish bow. Farah wants a beardini, which I was lucky enough to find during a psychic storm, and Ophelia asks for any ice spirit once winter comes along. I gave her an ice cream. There's still Oksano and Quill who want Capacity and Sheep. I haven't been able to tame a sheep yet, so I'm waiting on those 2. And the hardest are Guyana, who wants a poison spirit that matches her hairstyle. I don't know what that would be. Zed, who wants a robot electric spirit, too high level for me to fight right now. Rowan, who asked for me to decide what spirit to give them. I need longer to decide which spirit would be right. And Cleo, who asked for a dark spirit. I haven't even found a dark island, so I haven't seen any of them. But when I do, Cleo will be the first to know. I tried my first date with Farah once I hit 7 or 8 hearts with her. Besides spending all the festivals with her, she actually has the highest modifier for friendship gain of any villager. Farah is the highest at 1.5 times, with Osano and Ophelia being the next 2 easiest villagers. Guyana and Magic Man are the 2 hardest characters to gain friendship with, gaining less than 100% of the friendship they normally would. So this date with Farah went poorly. You have a short conversation and a chance to answer them about something, but I made her mad, so she ended it early. Finally, there was a cooking competition on fall 21st. This brought another character, Zafaran, to the island, though you can't build a relationship with her. I didn't have many recipes, so I made the popsy plant pudding. She liked it, but didn't love it, and I think Osano or Ophelia won. I spent the rest of the season watering crops and traveling to a few more islands looking for moonstones and battling spirits. I had been upgrading most of my tools slowly, as money was the hardest to acquire. By end of winter, all my tools were copper or a few iron, except the hoe, which didn't seem important to upgrade. I guess since you can find treasure maps with the locations of chests, you can upgrade the hoe to dig more spots, but the watering can was the most important thing to upgrade. In the last week, I made a disheartening discovery that the fall crops could be regrown from the same seeds after the first harvest. I wasted a lot of time cutting them down and replanting them, and I think it should have been obvious to me that they were regrowing. In winter, I mostly picked crops instead of harvesting them since I found I couldn't plant anything unless I had a greenhouse. Winter yields the best crops, and it's when ice spirits appear in the wild. I flew to more islands, collecting as many talismans as I could, and I had a pretty bad loss in battle to some powerful spirits on the northern edge of the map. I was trying to collect more crops, and my detour caused me to lose 2 days on the island after being unable to avoid the spirits on the map. I was a little unsure how to spend it as I didn't have enough sea glass from water spirits to make the greenhouse. But I started making more spirit stalls and bringing more spirits into the barn. Mining, fighting, exploring, that was all I could do. During fall and winter, I experimented with more spirits like Claudio, a water spirit whose ability makes you move faster in rain or snow, and Toxito, a poison spirit that lets you use the warp whistle a second time every day. It's a whistle that returns you to the main island once per day. You find it right at the start of spring. This ability was sometimes good, but I really got to discover the benefits of poison. This status damages the spirit every turn, and if they're weak, it can cut down their armor too. I made it into a fast poison user that stacked tons of poison on the enemy. One of the major undertakings this season was trying to take on another dungeon. I found another underlevel dungeons on one of the islands eastward, but I was hoping to take on the dungeon on the water island I had discovered in spring. I made a team that had no water or ice weaknesses and took on the first fight. The spirits had 80 plus HP with 3 of them in a battle. It took forever to whittle them down, and finally, as I got to the second fight and tried to defeat it, my power went out and I lost the entire day. Honestly, this was fine. You could save manually whenever you want, or at the end of the day, and I decided it was time to power up my spirits. I had been neglecting to invest points into 20 or so and that I had been using. Most had 2, 3, or even 4 levels of points to invest, but my 3 most used spirits, Cool Slime, Capacity, and Chimney, had 10 to 15 points. I want to talk a little bit about leveling and raising spirits. Armor increases the armor a spirit has, which reduces damage from attacks. I don't know if 1 armor point equals 1 armor on a spirit, but it's still a pretty good stat to have, for some. Power affects the damage of their attacks. Vitality raises the spirit's max HP, and it tells you exactly how much more HP you get. It's the same amount per level for each spirit. A low-level spirit will start by gaining 4 HP, but they gain more each level, so you have to give them more levels in Vitality to get more health. Speed increases the strength of Bash, the cards you use to reduce a spirit's armor. It also determines which side goes first. Probably level your spirit in a mix of all of them from the start, unless you have a case like Cool Slime, who has a ton of power already and needs armor and vitality to avoid immediately being killed by enemy spirits. Or Toxito, which I built to have no power and just overload enemies with poison and be very fast. Then I found most of the talismans. I had about 40 meditate and 30 cleanse talismans and about 10 study talismans. When choosing talismans from the gate, you should really only be taking meditate to upgrade cards or cleanse to remove cards. Your deck consists of all the cards of your 3 spirits combined, so the fewer cards you have, the easier it is to draw the cards you want. For each spirit, I cut some of their worst cards, like basic tackle cards or other effects I didn't need, and upgraded as many as I could. Upgraded cards are a huge improvement on whatever their effect is, so get some of those too. I'd been buying them from the Magic Man whenever I could, as he sells 1 for 400 gold a day. And when I say you shouldn't be taking study talismans, especially from the gates, I mean they're almost completely worthless. You can add cards to a spirit's deck by level, or buy them from the shop. If you give them a study talisman, you can't skip adding a card like you can on level, so you risk adding junk to their deck. I suppose if you can afford to spend money, buy them from the Magic Man, and you can feed them to spirits that aren't going to battle, and you get points in your skill tree for feeding talismans. I made a new team of Cool Slime, Capaciby, and Misty Slime. Despite having weaknesses to water and ice, this team was much stronger from their invested points, and had much stronger attacks than the previous team. I beat the third dungeon boss pretty easily. Another plan I had was a route of opening as many chests as I could in one day. I had a potion to boost the amount of gold I found in a chest, and I had been finding mines and clearing paths to the chests, trying to plot a route that could hit as many islands as possible. With Toxito, Claudio to boost movement, and Pappas, an earth spirit with an ability to reduce wind resistance while flying, I hit about 8 islands and found about 5 moonstones, thanks to a skill I chose to find more moonstones from chests. In the latter half of winter, I made the greenhouse, planted down a few crops to have something to grow, this time with sprinklers, since I had so much ore. These grew into sweater plants, which I found were the secret ingredient to one of the recipes. The sweater cookies give me a permanent +1 armor to a spirit that eats it, so I can feed them to a few spirits I plan to use regularly. At the end of winter, I started to get messages from the villagers about how much they would miss me, and I attended the New Year's celebration at the overlook near the north end of the island. Oh! How could I forget Maze Island? It's the one to the north with the spirit gate. I finally figured out how to clear it. I built a second alchemist tent and flew out there, planting the tent on the ground in front of the maze. Then the next day, I used the map, opening it excessively until I could navigate all the dead ends. In the middle of the island, I realized with horror that I would have to find a mine here, but I found one just after striking a few rocks. I have had an uncanny amount of luck finding mines after striking just a few rocks on any given island. I finally collected the darn spirit gate that was taunting me all year, and then wondered how long it would take me to get back out. Instead, I tried whistling back to the island, fed my spirits at the barn, and then flew back to the island, retrieved my tent, and whistled a second time using my boy Toxito's ability. Finally, I flew west past the first water island to a second island with another, albeit less complicated maze. I found a treasure map at the end, and a dungeon I'd have to go back for later. I also had a more successful date with Farah. I hadn't messed with the mechanic much, but I think they're a more platonic sort of affair, since they're the way you learn more about the villagers. I'll try more of them with the other villagers next year. After finishing winter, I ended up playing about 2 more weeks into the next spring. I bought a ton of seeds for flax flowers and stone fruits, as well as enough fertilizer to plant the crops in. I found out you can use the hammer to flatten land you've tilled, so I fixed the eyesore of a crop field, this time with enough sprinklers to cover them all. I got a greenhouse upgrade and planted a bunch more random crops, including flag flowers, since it has a water feature. I upgraded my watering can, the first to become a Moonstone level tool, but how ironic that as soon as I made it the best watering can I could ask for, I have so much ore that I can just make sprinklers to do it for me. I also built bridges across the pond next to my tent, and down by the east beach of the island, where I loaded up on lily pads. The irregular shoreline makes it a little longer to plant and harvest crops, so it was easier to plant them along straight lines. I found the fertilizer has a 50% boost to the crop's effectiveness for whatever it was fertilized. Stone fruits give 75 stamina, comparable to the winter crops, and flax flowers give 15 tame. Pretty small, but fine. They also don't seem to sell for more than their unfertilized counterpart. Otherwise, I wasn't sure what else to do with myself. I was planning on taking a break, so I didn't want to go all out in year 2. I gave most of the spirit resources to Zed for a quest he asked for, except for dark spirits. I got requests from him to defeat the spirits and from Cleo, who wanted a dark spirit of her own. I went out for a lot of fishing, taking a snorkel to make them bite faster, the highlight being a Moonstone quality spark star on an electric island. I discovered more islands to the northeast and west of the map. I realized I hadn't seen a psychic storm since summer until I ran into them back-to-back nights and used them to harvest spring plants. I also flew out to the island to find more plants I'd missed in spring. But that's about all I've done, a pretty good first year for any farming game I've played. I still have plenty of things I want to accomplish in the next year and beyond. Alright, one quick look at my spirit skill trees. This is a mechanic you unlock as soon as you get enough experience in any skill to gain 1 point, and you start at one of the skills at the top in each category. As soon as you have unlocked any adjacent skills, you can unlock with the next point. There is a lock between two skills, then you can only have one of them. For example, as soon as I get Spirit Walker, which is the next skill I want, then I can't have Tame Wizard, which makes it easier to tame spirits. But then again, I can still get Master Spirit Mancer to tame spirits of any level. Potion you can acquire and make in order to respec all your skill points if you need to. I'm going to use one eventually, probably to fix my archaeology. Each of these skills here has maybe only one or two things that are actually eligible to gain you points in that skill. Well, social is obvious. You just talk or interact with villagers. But foraging, for example, it's, fishing or chopping wood, I think. And I think that's the only two things that get experience in scavenging. So you'd have to look at the wiki to see exactly what gains you experience in each skill. This menu will show you your progress on how close you are to another skill. I found myself wondering what exactly you need to make the mirror for to look at your skill trees. I mean, I've had to make it a couple times just because I wanted to look at my skill trees, but then I just reset the day so I don't have to use up the Moonstone to make it, since you don't need to look at them very often. I don't exactly know what the point of this item is. Oh, and kind of unrelated, but I hardly had time to mention that I encountered a holographic spirit in winter. I was heading west to check out some more islands when I spotted it out of the corner of my eye. It was a poison spirit with bird brain. I was using it to battle with a few other poison spirits, and I ran into it by complete chance. That was a pretty good find. It was a close battle between it and my Claudio at the end, but I managed to tame it, so that was nice. I have lots more islands to find, including everything about dark islands and spirits. I have all but 3 dungeons to do, and all of the temples. I need to level my spirits more, and figure out which islands have spirits that aren't too strong to level on. What I've found is spirits are either below level 10 or 30 plus, way too high for my current spirits to beat. The best way to level spirits is almost certainly mass growing experience crops to feed them, but I like the battles. I've gotten a quest from Cleo to evolve a spirit, which makes leveling a spirit to 30, and finding a psychic stone, and I don't even know which spirits evolve. There's a way to marry a villager, and I want to progress relationships with the rest of them, and I might try some decorating. Eventually. Make my house bigger than a little tent, but it costs a lot of wood. You see all these little ghosts hanging around the tent? I don't think they actually do anything. They're just chilling. Moonstone Island was an absolute blast to play. I really came to understand the appeal of this type of game, picking all these different types of game loops to progress a little at a time, trying to fit in as much as you can in one day, watching yourself grow from a tiny plot of land to an entire farm operation. It was fun, and there's a few more of these games that I'd like to try, but that's all I've got for Moonstone Island, besides a few videos you can watch from other creators talking about this game. I will surely be back again in the future to continue. Thanks for watching.